Seen it. It's a huge camp.
It was one of the largest gatherings of Northern Plains Indians, with over 1,500 warriors.
And even after we told him that there's an overwhelming force down there, you better wait. But he was determined to go ahead and attack.
Reno was retreating before an Indian counterattack. Custer prepared for action. He sent a message recalling Benteen. Then, through his interpreter, Mitch Boyer, he told his Indian scouts to leave.
So the interpreter, Mitch Boyer, said, "Boys, you're lucky. Get away from here as fast as possible. I'm stuck. I sign up. So I'm going to die with him."
Joe Medicine Crow's grandfather, White Man Runs Him, escaped the battle. Interpreter Mitch Boyer faithfully rode with Custer into a valley called Medicine Tail Coulee. And it was from here that Custer and the 7th Cavalry rode into history and myth. But he left behind him a trail of clues, and more than 100 years later, archaeologists started picking up that trail.
I do recall the very first day, the first hour, in fact, the metal detector sang. It was one find after another.
Right here?
Yep.
Over 5,000 artifacts have been found. Every one was numbered and logged to create a detailed computer map of the battlefield. And this was only a sample of what lies buried. Even today, the battlefield reveals an extraordinary find.
There she is.
Yeah,
It's in nice shape.
great condition. It's a .45 caliber carbine round, unfired, in very nice condition.
The 7th Cavalry was only issued .45 caliber Springfield carbines and pistols, so it's easy to identify U.S. Army bullets and cartridges. But what about the hundreds of other cartridges and bullets? These can only have come from Indian guns. What can these bullets and cartridges actually tell us about the battle? When a trooper's carbine is fired, the spent cartridge is ejected and falls onto the ground. So the place where a trooper's cartridge case is found reveals a trooper's position. Lead bullets have a similar story to tell. Indian bullets are found impacted at trooper positions, and trooper bullets at Indian positions.
Yeah, that's a .45 carbine bullet.
It was the huge amounts of Indian bullets and cartridge cases that surprised the archaeologists.
The quantity of cartridge cases that was found in and around these Indian positions was significant, which suggested that there were a lot of weapons there.
How is it possible to know the quantity and types of guns that were used against the troopers? Cartridges and bullets can offer clues to the guns that fired them.
But those are the marks we're looking for.
That's what we're looking for, the firing pin impression marks and the possibility of extractor marks. When a bullet is fired, it travels down the barrel. It is marked by the rifling characteristics that are placed in that barrel. They're analogous to a fingerprint if you have enough individual characteristics to individualize a particular firearm.
Analyzing the bullets reveals that the amount and types of Indian guns were far greater than previously thought.
What we found were in excess of 47 types of firearms used by the warriors against the soldiers at Little Bighorn.
That means that more than 800 warriors were armed with anything from muzzle-loading antiques to the latest repeating rifles. Custer was outgunned 4-1.
And we were truly surprised at the numbers of weapons that were present here.
The myth of Indian warriors with only bows and arrows was overturned. But how did they acquire so many firearms?
The Indians acquired weapons just like anybody else did. They could go to the trading post and purchase them or trade for them. They were used for hunting. In this case, they were used for hunting white men.
Any firearm was a good firearm as far as a Plains Indian was concerned.
Yes.
And it could range from, 75 caliber horse pistols, flintlocks, to percussion rifles, to cartridge guns.
Yeah, that's 66 Winchester?
Right. Because it's very lightweight, and it was very appropriate for Indian use because it was like a bow and arrow that it fired very rapidly, but it was still a very short-range weapon. And as a warrior, you wanted to get in very close and maybe use the smooth bore with a sawed-off bore. So you could get in, you wanted to see the look on that man's face when he knew that you knew that he knew he was going down, and that's what the warfare was all about. So revolvers also were incredibly popular because they were the same thing as all the other type of weapons. They were a handheld, very lightweight, rapid fire, very close range weapon.
Bullets reveal much, but it would be the cartridge cases that unraveled the mystery of the defeat of the 7th Cavalry.
When that cartridge is fired, it is struck from the rear by a firing pin. That firing pin impression has great value in identification.
Every gun's firing pin is unique, and it leaves the same impression on every cartridge case it fires. If it's possible to match cartridge cases to the same gun, it may be possible to track the movement of guns around the battlefield.
And there we have 2 firing pin imprints. They're different sizes and different imperfections, and that represents 2 different weapons.
If cartridges have matching firing pin impressions, they must have come from the same gun. Douglas Scott cross-checked over 1,500 cartridges looking for matching firing pin impressions. It would take hundreds of hours of painstaking work. Then, one by one, he found them.
Let's bring our cartridge case up we've been looking at, and the new one on the left. We have some unique characteristics up here and in the middle here that say these 2 were fired in the same gun. This one was fired at Calhoun Hill. This one closer to Last Stand Hill, about a quarter of a mile apart, and therefore we know that weapon literally moved. It might represent a fleeing soldier, or it might actually represent a captured weapon that the Indians picked up and then turned against Custer.
By connecting the cartridges fired by the same gun, it was now possible to see troopers and warriors moving across the battlefield.
We could see that soldiers had moved very little, but the Indians were moving all about that field.
An Army weapon reputed to have been at the battle was test-fired to identify its firing pin impression. Amazingly, it matched to 3 cartridges, numbers 244, 240, and 175, all from different places on the battlefield.
Here it is. This is the spot that we've picked up cartridge 175. This is an Army cartridge we found on this spot, and this is the only gun in the collections here that it matched. And
So that gun
that
was
gun
right here.
was right here on this spot,
June.
25th of June.
Yeah.
Trooper could have been here and pointing at a warrior that direction, or up on the hill here, or spinning around firing in that direction, firing at the ridge stop out here where we know there were many warriors trying to protect himself until he was struck down. And it's had a lot of use since then.
I can see that.
And been repaired and fixed, and probably was captured. May have been used against Custer elsewhere. Really rather exciting moment. We knew we had a tool that would allow us to do something no one had ever done before with a battlefield.
That tool would reveal how tactics, and especially weapons, played a decisive role in the battle. But what about the men who fired those guns? Vincent Charlie was an ordinary trooper. He was mutilated and left to die. Now, forensic science is revealing his face.
I sometimes think about them and their families and how they must have suffered and what might really have taken place. But they were people, they were somebody's sons, possibly somebody's fathers, you know, they were real people.
What do we really know about the troopers of the 7th Cavalry? Were they really the crack troopers of legend?
We know the soldiers from the enlistment records are average height of 5'7", average age of 22 years old, average weight of 150 pounds. Some of the ones that we found are much younger in age, 16, 17 years of age. They weren't supposed to be in the Army at that time.
We know that half of them were immigrants, mostly from Ireland, England, Germany, mostly from Western Europe. Most of them were doubtlessly from poor backgrounds.
These were poor immigrants, but they had joined the legendary 7th Cavalry. They should have been well-trained and fighting fit, but the troopers' bones tell a very different story.
Here are teeth, and these black tarry stains suggest tobacco use, particularly as in the form of pipe tobacco. He lived a tough life, little oral hygiene, bad diet, and in that way, he's probably very typical of most of the troopers. There's a tooth here that's missing a crown. It's rotted away.
We also see that they had a very rough life. We can see that, knowing that these guys had rheumatism and arthritis at the age of 22.
So what we've got here is a vertebra, and you can see these depressions that indicate that disc was starting to deteriorate. And so as the troopers rode over the tough trails, these shock-absorbing structures would start to deteriorate, and they would end up with back problems.
The 7th Cavalry was badly trained and poorly fed. Now, after weeks in the Indian camp, the right wing